Thank you for tuning into my YouTube channel, Curious Perro. Today we're going to focus on outfielders in the 2020 Fantasy Baseball Draft. I hope you enjoy this video. Before we get started, I want to say hello to those who are just freshly tuning in. I appreciate you joining us on Curious Perro. I've already posted a number of videos on some of the positions, ranging from catcher all the way to shortstop. Today's video, one of the more fun, is about outfield and selections during the 2020 Fantasy Draft. I encourage you to subscribe to my channel. Maybe even click the bell so you can get notified when a new video arrives. I'm going to focus on fantasy here for a month or so. Fantasy baseball starts when you make your draft picks, but after that there's a number of strategies involved with regards to being able to handle an entire season of baseball. The reason that I make these videos is to help you to have the best team possible so you can win your fantasy baseball league. Our number 5 selection in outfield, and this is a great group of guys, is Mookie Betts of the Los Angeles Dodgers. The expectation is, based on the last few years, we'll have about 30 home runs. RBI is about 80. Remember, he bats near the top of the lineup. Somewhere between 15 and 20 stolen bases. Hits right around 300 and scores between 120 and 130 runs. He scores a ton. The big question is how will the Dodgers use him? With my number 5 pick from the Los Angeles Dodgers, Mookie Betts. After coming off a wonderful World Series championship, our number 4 selection is Juan Soto of the Washington Nationals. The most amazing thing about Juan Soto is the numbers I'm about to read to you of what our expectations are for 2020 from him. Now remember, he is entering his sophomore season after winning the World Series last year, so maybe our expectations are a little great, and thus that is why he's number 4. So we're expecting around 35 home runs, about 110 runs scored, about 110 RBI, double digits in stolen bases, and batting between 280 and 90. This is a guy who's going to be the upper middle of the lineup for the Nationals, but remember Rendon's gone, so that will cause a little bit of the challenge for him. Plus, repeating is very difficult. Our number 4 selection for outfielder is Juan Soto of the Washington Nationals. Now we get to outfielders who we expect to hit more than 40 home runs. Now Bellinger I have put at first base, so he's not included in this last group of 3. My number 3 selection of outfielder for this year's fantasy draft is Christian Yelich of the Milwaukee Brewers. Christian Yelich is coming off of a season-ending injury that made it so they could not play in the playoffs last year. But our expectations continue very high after his number 2 MVP voting last year and number 1 2 years ago. Our expectations are 40 home runs, 100 plus runs scored, 100 RBIs, between 25 and 30 stolen bases, and a 300-plus batting average. This is for a guy who plays for a team that's very competitive but doesn't have a lot of great players. That's the Milwaukee Brewers. But our expectations of him have grown since he's moved to Milwaukee from the Marlins. My number 3 selection in this season's fantasy outfielder draft is Christian Yelich of the Milwaukee Brewers. With my number 2 selection of outfielders, I'm going to select Ronald Acuña of the Atlanta Braves. This outfield group, these 5, and particularly these top 3, our expectations are amazing. For Ronald Acuña in 2020, here's what we expect. 40-plus home runs, 120-plus runs scored, over 100 runs batted in, 30-plus stolen bases, and a batting average around 280. Acuña is another spot where you can get some stolen bases. I talk about stolen bases often. Again, my number 2 selection for outfield in the 2020 fantasy draft, Ronald Acuña of the Atlanta Braves. My number 1 selection for the best outfielder in the 2020 fantasy draft is no other than Mike Trout of the Los Angeles Angels. This is not an unexpected selection. Mike Trout, between the MVPs and his numbers that he's put up, has been deemed the best player in baseball and a future Hall of Famer. That is almost a for sure thing based on the numbers I've seen. Let me read to you the expectation with regards to numbers. Now, some of the other players' expectations are a little bit higher, but the thing is Trout, year in and year out, even with injuries here and there, his numbers continue to be phenomenal. We expect 40-plus home runs, over 110 runs scored, with over 100 RBIs, double-digit stolen bases, and a batting average 300, maybe a little bit better. This is on a team that historically hasn't done well, and they've added a few key pieces, Rendon being one of them. It will be interesting to see how the Angels do, but whether they do good or not good, the number 1 outfielder in this year's draft is Mike Trout of the Los Angeles Angels.